I'm so good at your names now that I did attendance without any of you seeing, so I know all of them. Thank you. It's been a while, but one last call for Otto. Didn't see any new face in here, but yep, okay. Maybe he'll show up one day. Can you record that? That'd be crazy. Okay, we have to go over the syllabus for this week. So this week, week 3, airspace charts and regulations. Today's airspace. It's going to be a long day and we're one day behind. So we're really going to try to run through this today. Hopefully I'll get into a little bit of day 2 by the end of today, and then chart symbology, and then the FARs regulations from the FAR aim that we need to know, and then the quiz on Friday. So we'll get into it. This is the overview for the week. We're on week 3. We know that. Okay. How many people were very nice to me and looked over airspace over the long weekend? Yeah, front row. Can count on front row. Some of the back. Some of the back. Okay. Okay. All right. Simply, there's going to be a lot of information. If you haven't looked over this at all, this is probably going to be way too much for your brain to comprehend for today. So just take notes and then we'll keep going over it for the rest of the week. But starting generally, the national airspace systems, there's 2 categories, regulatory and non-regulatory. It means what it usually means. Some of the airspace is regulated and some of it is not regulated. This is referring to the FAA. So under those regulatory, non-regulatory parts of the airspace system, we have 4 types of airspace: controlled, uncontrolled, special use, and other airspace. So controlled is going to be when we talk about Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, etc. And prohibited areas are under controlled. Uncontrolled are going to be that special use airspace, or uncontrolled is going to be Gulf, and then special use airspace is going to be under that non-regulatory as well. So this is a general overview. We're going to dig into each part, but just so you know, some airspace, most airspace is regulated by the FAA. There's a bunch of rules that we have to remember for each airspace, and then non-regulatory, there's a couple of them that aren't watched by the FAA and have rules. So yeah, dictated by complexity, density, airspace density, aircraft movement. We're going to get into all of that. So starting with Alpha, actually start here. Does anyone remember anything about Class Alpha airspace from looking at it at home that is important to know? What's special about Class A? Yes.
It's all across the US. Yeah, it's 18 to 60.
Okay, perfect. Starts at 18,000 feet, MSL. For most of the classes of airspace, it's going to be an MSL, and then we'll get over we'll go over the one airspace that's in AGL, but 18,000 feet MSL is where Class Alpha starts. What else do we need to know about Class Alpha? What's special?
It's the most restricted.
It is. What is it restricted to? What kind of flight? Exactly. Okay, well that goes to, we'll start with this. First, we're going from 18,000 MSL up to flight level 600. Flight level 600 is just 60,000, okay? So 18,000 to 60,000 MSL. They also say flight level 600 because 60,000 is a mouthful to say over the radio. So flight level 600, 60,000, up to and including. This is going to be important as we continue through this, talking about dimensions. Is up to and including is going to be important to. Some of them are up to and not including. So we'll keep going over that, but 18,000 to 60,000. Here we go with the next point. All operations in Class Alpha must be under instrument flight rules, IFR. So you are a VFR pilot, student pilot, you're going to get your private pilot's license. You don't have your instrument rating yet. You cannot go fly in Class airspace. Also, slings can't get into Class A airspace too high, but also just know IFR, only IFR operations up here. Okay. Weather minimums is gonna be tricky because there's a lot of weather minimums we have to memorize, and it's just plain and simple, you have to memorize them. There's a bunch of different ways people memorize. I don't know if people have seen the triangle that people draw out for weather minimums for different airspace. That's what I used. We'll look over that later, but weather minimums for Class Alpha, none, because it's all instrument flight rules. You don't need weather minimums, okay? Is there anything else that we read about Class Alpha airspace that might be important to know when we're talking about chart symbology?
Oh, it's not depicted on.
Exactly. Big point we need to know with Class Alpha airspace is also you are not going to be able to see it on a sectional chart. So we're going to go over what each airspace looks like on a sectional chart and how to identify it. Class Alpha is not going to be depicted. I don't think that's on the slide. So these are the main points. Write them down if you don't know them already. We'll keep going. Okay, Class Bravo. What are some major points about Class Bravo that we learned?
They're for big aircraft.
Big, yeah. B for big, Boeing, busy airspace, busiest airspace, busiest controlled airspace, big airplanes. What's our closest Bravo airspace to us? LAX. Duh. Okay. All right. Classified for very large and busy airports, LAX, San Francisco, Denver, etc. Dimensions are customizable. They're going to change every time surrounding big airports. So I think they put it out there. It's shaped like an upside down wedding cake with the major international airport in the middle, has a small section around it, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger on the outside. Does that make sense? We used to have, oh, here it is. Someone made a, what is this, a 3D printed, I think this is actually for LAX. So starts at the bottom and it's small around our international airport, and then it gets bigger and bigger on top to cover more airspace the higher we go on top of the airport, okay? So this is an example of what it looks like. It changes every time. Entry requirements. Big point about Class Bravo. It is the only airspace that you need to hear specific words in order to fly into. You have to, one, establish two-way radio communication with, I think that's on here, with ATC. They don't have two-way radio communication, but the clearance has to be cleared into the Bravo. You have to hear those words, and not only do you have to hear them, you have to repeat them back with your tail number. That means you're establishing two-way radio communications. Both of you have confirmed you are cleared through the Bravo, you are able to fly. If you do not hear those words, you are not cleared through the Bravo, you cannot enter Bravo airspace. Also, you cannot be a student pilot mainly flying through Class Bravo airspace. You have to have a private pilot's license, or you have to have a proper student pilot solo endorsement through the Bravo. We're going to get into specifically LAX's Bravo a little bit more. There's something in here, you see a little hole in the middle of this? There's something called a corridor that goes to the Bravo. We'll talk about this later, with a couple different ways that you can go through the Bravo without entering Bravo airspace, and you're on different communications and you're squawking a certain squawk code so they know that you're flying through this little hole in the Bravo. But otherwise, if you are asking to be cleared through the Bravo, you have to have a private pilot's license, or you have to be endorsed by your instructor as a student pilot, specifically to fly through the Bravo. And you need a Mode C transponder. What's a Mode C transponder? Yeah, they're similar. What they added in 2020 is actually in Bravo Airspace and Alpha and Charlie. You have to have both. So now it's required that you have a mode C transponder and ADS-B out. They're similar systems. Mode C transponder is a little more ancient than ADS-B out. Mode C transponder is radar based and it gives ATC your location and your tail number. But ADS-B out gives more specific information like your exact altitude, it gives your speed that you're going, et cetera, et cetera. And so you need now in class Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, you need a mode C transponder and ADS-B out. ADS-B out works like satellite base. Okay, so that's why it gives more specific information. But they're similar systems, but they're not the same system. Okay, and they give more specific information. Yes. Yes, ADS-B out of satellite, mode C transponder is radar based. That's why it gives less information. Gotcha. And then weather minimums for class Bravo, visibility 3 statute miles, and cloud clearance is clear of clouds. I'll show you the little triangle that people use to remember all of them, but for right now, you can just write down specifically 3 statute miles, clear clouds. Those are our weather minimums. Alright, on a sectional chart, here is what Bravo airspace looks like. This looks like a lot. I know this isn't even the most complicated one because there are many others, but this is LAX down here. And then each one of these, you see this like thick blue line? It's confusing with the light blue lines right here. These are airways in the sky, Victor Airways with a V. But dark blue lines, dark thick blue lines are shelves of the class Bravo. So each one of these is its own shelf with its own altitude restrictions. So these dark blue fractions are altitude restrictions for the specific shelf that it's in. So for this one, it goes from 2,000 to 10,000. It's in hundred or tens of thousands. 2,000 to 10,000. So this one is what? Yes, exactly. What is this one down here? Right over the LAF surface to 10,000, right? So there's a lot of numbers everywhere on the sectional. It gets confusing. Dark blue fractions gives you what the shelf is covering of the Bravo. So that means below 2,000, you're outside of the Bravo shelf. You're not in the Bravo airspace. But from 2,000 to 10,000, you're inside. And then above 10,000, you're again outside of the Bravo shelf. Does that make sense? So from this one close over LAX, surface to 10,000, you're in the Bravo. So if you cross this anywhere between the surface and 10,000, you're in the Bravo. But over here on top, 5,000, that gives you a lot of space underneath that you're not in the Bravo airspace, up to 10,000. Okay? Yeah, this is gonna be a lot. You're going to have to get into, by the end of this week, I'm gonna point to somewhere on the sectional, because there's overlapping airspace on all this, and I'll basically say on this point, tell me from the ground to space what the different airspaces are. Because they're gonna be layered on top of each other. Sometimes you have a delta, like at Torrance, that goes from the surface to like 2,500, and then on top of that you have a Bravo shelf. And then there's echo airspace that moves in between, and then alpha, and so on and so on. So it sounds like a lot right now, but we're going over the basics today. Right now, you know blue solid line for Bravo and blue fraction for the altitudes. Okay? For the Bravo, yeah, we need to know blue solid line.
The function.
Oh, the fraction is going to be the altitudes that the shelf covers. So from here, the fraction starts at like the floor and the ceiling of the shelf, right? So the floor would be 2,000 and the ceiling would be 10,000. That means between those two altitudes, you're in Bravo airspace. But outside of that fraction, you're not. Yes.
Fault exact items above now 5 10.
Where's Compton? Down here, oh, there it is. Where's the actual airspace? The courthouse is right here, so the actual runway is right here. All the way at the bottom, so it's outside of this, and I can't see what the shelf is for this section. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Down here, the section starts here and comes over here to the water, and there should be a fraction, but it's cut off in the picture, so the fraction's somewhere down here. They could tell you, I'm sure it's like 5,000 like on top here, but look on the, let's see. Yeah, if you want to look right now on far, that shelf is, yeah, 5,000. It's actually, if you look on ForeFlight, it's actually hard to find. I'm gonna back up this because this is a good example of finding the side. Okay. Where am I? Oh, yellow is congested, like area, like populated areas. So like the city is all this area, so it's yellow, exactly. Like populated areas, and then the mountains over here, there's not really populated. So that's what the yellow means. So like around major airports, usually there's a little bit of yellow because there's a city around the airport. This has to do with minimum safe altitudes over populated congested areas versus over mountainous areas. We'll get into that, but there's a certain altitude you have to keep over these yellow populated areas so you're not flying too close to people's houses and buildings and such. Okay. Looking at Compton here, what is the Bravo shelf? Can we see? We're right here in Compton.
Surface to 10,000.
It's on. Actually, don't even see the, does anyone see the fraction? There it is, yeah. There's the fraction, 5,000. Sorry? Yeah, Compton's right here, right?
Oh.
So look at where the shelf, it goes, where's mine? I know, it's hard. There's a lot of, this is the point I was getting at, is it's all the way to the side. You have to take a big picture look at the airspace because it's not always going to be right on top of where you're looking. Where's a big line? Okay. It goes, we see the orange, this, then this, and this, and this. We see the orange outline? That's a whole shelf, that whole area. And then you can see it splits here, it splits here to a different shelf. Over here, this one. So this whole area is all
10,000, 5,000.
yes. Does that make sense? So you have to zoom out, look at the whole area that the shelf of the Bravo that's encompassed by that big thick blue line, and then find within that whole area where the fraction is, right?
And if Long Beach share the same.
And us, right?
Space.
Us too.
Oh, and
We're right there. Yeah.
When does the surface to 10,000?
That's the surface is always going to be right over the airport that the Bravo is protecting. So that's LAX, right? So the surface is right on top of LAX, and they bring it out, the surface, they bring it out here because so many aircraft are coming in from the east to the airport instead of over the ocean. So they block out surface so that this airspace is protected for all that inbound traffic. All the jets that are coming on instrument flight plans. So that's why they bring it out a little bit more over here to cover this whole space for incoming traffic. But on top of the airport that the Bravo is protecting is always gonna be surface to the highest in the area, which is 10,000. And then everything else, they kind of make adjustments based on how busy the airspace is. Cause this airspace is very busy. There's 3, if you include Hawthorne here, there's 4 airports in this airspace. So they put it up to 5,000. And then over here, there's no airports, so they put it to 2,000. Cause that, again, this is a path from the west that all the big jets are coming in on their instrument approaches. So they want to clear this airspace low to the ground so those jets have clearance. They're able to control that airspace where the jets are right here. But yeah, everyone see this whole big section, all is going to be this one fraction found in the section, 5,000 to 10,000 MSL.
Walk right there, man.
We're gonna get, there's a lot. Let's not get ahead of ourselves right now, okay? We're gonna start with Bravo. We understand blue line, blue fraction, okay? I'm gonna get into every single part of this today, if not during this week, if we don't get to it, but we'll get to that. This is called a TFR. Okay. Down here, more Bravo shelves we're talking about. This is the practice area, right? You see this shelf starts here, comes down here, the blue line, the Disney kind of interrupts it, but the blue line comes down here. Here's the fraction that correlates to this. So when we're in the practice area over the breakwater, where's the Bravo shelf start? 8,000, right? We're flying out here. If we go to 8,001, for some reason, we're up that high, we're busting the Bravo. That means we're in Bravo airspace and we probably didn't ask for clearance, right? So this means a shelf is over top of the practice area airspace from 8,000 to 10,000, where you cannot enter without ATC clearance. Got it? What's the shelf over here on this side? This one. It's 5,000 to 10,000, right? What? Oh, well. What about if we come out here? Oh, here we are doing straight out. Woo, straight out. We turn here. And we actually come over here to go around the, whatever it is, around the little end of the coast right here. We just fly out a little bit over here and make a wide turn. Where are we right here? What airspace? Bravo, right? Because where's the fraction? Up here? Surface to 10,000. This is why we have to be so careful on straight out departures where you turn at the shore. I'm sure they've been over the noise abatement. You have to go straight out all the way to the shore, and then you can turn down here, and you have to have situational awareness that you do not cross this line. It's very small. See that space right here at the end? Very small space before you're in surface Bravo, which is very, very, very bad. That's what gets you a number. That's how you get the number from ATC. A pilot deviation is if you bust the Bravo, meaning you fly into Bravo airspace without ATC clearance. You just put even the nose of your airplane into that airspace as you're turning around this coastline. Very bad. Okay? Be aware of the airspace around you, but that's Bravo. We'll keep going. We'll come back to this many, many, many times this week. Okay, Charlie airspace. It's kind of like a wannabe Bravo. It's still very, very busy. And the dimensions are also customizable like Bravo. It surrounds congested airports. Our closest one is John Wayne, right? That's down in Orange County. We'll look at it in a second. But the dimensions are always going to change. It's around congested airports that aren't as big as Bravo, like international airports like LAX. Typically, there's an upper shelf and a lower shelf. Typically, the upper shelf is a 10 nautical mile radius and goes up to 4,000 AGL. And typically, the lower shelf has a 5 nautical mile radius and goes to 1,200 AGL. Entry requirements for Class Charlie. Establish two-way radio communications. So, What do we mean by that? In the Bravo, we talked about establishing two-way radio communications. To enter the Bravo means we hear them say the specific words cleared into the Bravo, cleared through the Bravo, and then you reply cleared through the Bravo for Sierra Lima, whatever your tail number is. That establishes two-way radio communications to go through. Does anyone have any idea what it means to establish two-way radio communications through Class Charlie? Yes.
Last turn.
It is kind of just talking to them, but you also have to have them read your tail number. So if you get on and you want to fly through Class Charlie or enter Class Charlie to land in some airport, and you get on and you make your call, you say I'm 5 miles from wherever inbound with whatever information, and they say, whoever, stand by. If they don't read your tail number, if they just say stand by, or sometimes they'll say I did, which means you push a button in there so they can see on the radar where you are. If you haven't heard from them saying your full tail number, you're not cleared through. A lot of the times, even if they say stand by or whatever, they'll start with your tail number. They'll say sling 864 Sierra Lima, blah, 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 blah. As long as they say your tail number, 864 Sierra Lima, that means you are cleared. You don't have to hear through Class Charlie. You don't have to hear cleared through Class Charlie, but they need to recognize that you're there with your tail number. If for some reason they just give you instructions without recognizing your tail number, you are not allowed to continue into their airspace. Make sense? So two-way means they call you out by your tail number and then you respond with your tail number. Yes.
How would you know if they're talking?
Sometimes they'll just respond to you. If you make a call and you're saying I'm inbound, blah, 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 they'll say stand by. And they're talking to you because you just talked, but that doesn't mean that they're ready to receive you into the airspace. They're saying, we'll get back to you. Sometimes they're so busy, they'll say, whoever just called, stand by. Like whoever just, whatever, hold outside the airspace. That obviously means stay outside the airspace. But there's rare situations where they reply to you because you just talked and they casually reply, and then you forget that they didn't specify your tail number and you just keep flying towards the airspace. If they don't get back to you and say specific instructions with your tail number, you need to do like a circle around the airspace before you get in. Most of the time, this won't be a problem. Establishing two-way, like you said, it's practice. It's good practice for them to say your tail number when you call them, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen every time. They're people too, they mess up or they're just too busy. They don't remember the tail number that you just said and they say, you know, stand by, we'll get to you in a second, whatever. That means you need to stay outside of the airspace until they recognize you and then you can fly to wherever they say. Again, very rare not to get it, but that's what two-way radio communications mean. MOTC transponder, I already talked about this. I think it was January of 2020, they changed this to MOTC transponder and ADSB out. So you need both of them in Charlie airspace. And weather minimums, 3 statute miles visibility, that's pretty standard. And the cloud clearance is 1,000 above, 500 below, and 2,000 horizontal. So people like to remember this by 152, and they add it. I'll show you the triangle again, but this is pretty standard. If it's not clear clouds, it's going to be 152. 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal. And you might ask, how do I know that I am 2,000 feet horizontal of a cloud? Make your best guess. There's not really obviously if you're at an altitude and they have given an ATIS with clouds at 1,500 and you're flying at 1,000, that means you're 500 feet below where the cloud layer is, right? But if there's clouds that they haven't reported, you're just doing a visual separation. There's no exact way to figure this out if the cloud layer is not reported. Best practice, stay away from clouds if you need to, but 1,000 above and 500 below is doable if you're given a cloud layer report, but 2,000 horizontal. Use your best judgment for how far away that is. All right, Charlie. Charlie is gonna be magenta, solid lines, just like Bravo. The lines are solid and thick, but they are magenta, purple, whatever you want to call it. We always say magenta. And they also are in shelves, just like the Bravo. Here's a shelf. The middle over the airport is always going to be mostly a circle around the airport, and then you have shelves around that circle that split each one. So out here in the water, if you're just wanting to fly next to the coast down the shore, where's the Charlie shelf out in the water over here start?
15,000. 1,000.
There we go, there we go. 1,500 and 5,400. Okay. So that's pretty low, right? So if you're flying at 3.5 out here in the water, are you in the Charlie airspace? Yes, right? Over here, when you start the Charlie, right here in this shelf, it's 3,500 to 5,400. So if you're flying at 3,000, are you in Charlie airspace? Right here? I'm flying on the coast right here.
No.
3,000, I'm not in the Charlie airspace. But then you keep flying into here. Now you are in Charlie airspace, and then you're out of it on the other side. Okay? Right over top of the airport, again, surface to 4,400 MSL. It's pretty much the same as Bravo. We're just looking at the shelves and trying to find the fraction, this time the magenta fraction, inside of each like little piece, right? Makes sense? Okay, we're gonna keep going. Class Delta. Why do we want to know about Class Delta? Torrance is a Class Delta, right? Also customizable and surrounds smaller towered airports like Torrance. Typically reaches up to 2,500 MSL with a radius of 4 nautical miles. That's pretty standard. We'll look at Sky Vector if I have to, but you'll see with Torrance, the box that shows our dimensions shows that it goes to 2,400. That's because our field elevation is 103. So we still reach that 2,500 MSL. Entry requirements for Delta established two-way radio communications. Again, that means that the ATC, the tower, has acknowledged you with your tail number. And Mode C transponder and ADS-B out are not required for Class Delta. That's just Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. So the only requirement for Class Delta is two-way radio communications with the controlling tower. The minimums are 3 statute miles visibility and 152. 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal. Okay? We got that. All right. Class Delta on a sectional chart is dashed blue lines, segmented lines around, usually in a circle. Sometimes they have a little box. Sometimes, like our Delta is more of a box and a circle, but blue dashed lines means Delta airspace. And then how we tell what the altitude Delta airspace goes up to, it's always going to be surface. And then they have this blue kind of segmented box that has up until 2,800. So from here, Delta goes from the surface to 2,800. Got it? If I go back to Sky Vector, we have a lot of deltas around us. Where's my pen? Okay. They just redid these lines for our delta versus Hawthorne. So I'm tracing our delta. Looks like this, right? So our delta segmented line intersects with Hawthorne's delta, which is this circle here that goes around right next to Compton. This line right here is the end of our delta, and you go straight into Hawthorne's delta. There used to be a space here. Recently, within like literally the last couple months, they have taken away that space in the middle, and now it goes straight from our delta into their delta. So you cannot fly anywhere over here across our delta out of our airspace into this area without talking to Hawthorne Airport Tower. Okay? Everyone see the outlines, the dash lines? Over here, we're right next to Long Beach. Long Beach's delta is like a full circle. It actually goes this way. There it is. Dash lines. I mean, I covered it up with the orange, but it's dash line there. Okay? What if this is Long Beach's delta airspace? What are the dimensions of this delta? Where does it start and where does it end for Long Beach? The circle right here. Surface to what? There we go. Thank you. Over here, Seal Beach, 2,500. See how these are all pretty close? Usually it's gonna be 25, but it's 2,500 MSL is the standard, so we have 2,400 on here because we have 100 feet of field elevation. But pretty standard to be around 2,500 feet MSL. Let me do some back. If we're gonna get a little bit harder. Chino Airport. Over here, you see that dashed line? That's gonna be a delta, right? What are the dimensions?
Up to, but not included.
Up to, but not including. Someone did some homework over the weekend. The minus here, it's hard to see because this is a dashed line, but there's a minus symbol in front of the 27 for 2,700. If there's a minus, that means up to, but not including. And this is usually used because this delta is underneath a shelf of the Charlie. You see the Charlie airspace right on top of it. And that Charlie airspace starts at 2,700. So at 2,700, you will be in Charlie airspace, not in Delta, because that has a minus 27. So at 2,699, you're in Chino, Delta airspace, but up to and not including 2,700, because as soon as you get to 2,700, you're in the Charlie shelf. It's out here. And you see how this shelf goes like all the way around here, but the fraction is all the way in this corner. See, that's why you have to zoom out, look at the big picture. This whole shelf is 2,000. Yes.
Why don't they just say?
I don't have a good answer for you. This is the way they've done it. Also here, another delta for bracket. Also inside on top is this Charlie shelf at 2,700. So you have the minus 27. That means the delta goes from the surface to 2,699 and then 2,700. So the minus means up to but not including 2,700. Yeah. Yes.
You're at, if it says 25,
Mm-hmm.
go like, if you're at 2501, is that outside there?
Yep. So any of these numbers, you're gonna want to stay probably 500 feet below what their top altitude is. So if here I was flying over here and the Charlie that I haven't spoken to anyone about entering Charlie airspace, and it says 2,700 over here, I would stay 500 feet below that because as soon as you're in 2,700, you're in the airspace. Or if you're at 5,000 up here, you're in the airspace. You can be at 5,001 and you're not in the airspace, but that's a little too close. So anywhere inside these numbers, you are in the airspace, even by 1 foot. Okay. Let's go back to here. There's delta, the segmented line, right? Okay, class echo airspace. People talk about echo, or the way that they remember echo is by saying everywhere, echo E for everywhere. Meaning this echo airspace is going to fill in the gaps of other airspace. So like we talked about, you have a delta on the surface, and maybe you have a Bravo or a Charlie shelf on top of that. If there's any space in between those airspaces, it's going to be echo airspace, okay? There's 2 points at which echo airspace starts, and it's based off a like Vignette line, which I'll show you, but you can either start at 700 AGL or at 1,200 feet AGL. This is when AGL comes into play. This is not MSL like Alpha Bravo Charlie. This is AGL, above ground level. So we have to remember that when we're flying. But 700 is a starting point, 700 feet, and 1,200 is a starting point. I'll show you on the sectional what the difference is in starting. But entry requirements, there are none. Class Echo has no entry requirements. You don't have to talk to anyone. You don't have to have a mode C transponder. You don't have to have ADSB out. No requirements for VFR. Weather minimums is different based on where you are above 10,000 or below 10,000 MSL. So below it's 3 statute miles and 152, and above 10,000 MSL it's 5 statute miles and 111. This is gonna be part of the memorizing that you have to do for the weather minimums, but we'll look at that. So difference between below 10,000 MSL and above, visibility is different and cloud clearance is different. I'll give you like 30 seconds to write the rest of it. Remember at this point, if cloud clearance like this, 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal, it's all the same. So just write 152. You'll remember 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal. It always goes above, below, horizontal. And visibility is 3 versus 5 if you're above 10,000. Okay? Moving on.
Gives you a goggles and probably it's like this.
It depends. The Garmin can give you updated information from airports that are giving cloud information, but it can't tell you, it can't recognize a cloud in the sky that you can measure away from yourself. But it will give you updated weather information, delayed updated weather information, but it has to be reported from a facility about the clouds. It can't recognize clouds in the sky. Okay. Class Echo, this where it gets a little bit more complicated, okay? So let's lock in. The vignette that I talked about here, this is what the vignette looks like. So there's like a shaded side and then like a solid line side, right? So this inside is like the kind of shaded middle, and then outside of here is like the solid side, right? So outside of the vignette, you start echo at 1,200 feet AGL. Inside the vignette, you start echo at 700 feet AGL. Remember, you wrote down you could start at 700, you could start at 1,200. Inside this vignette, the shaded side, if we're inside of it, echo starts at 700. And outside of it, echo starts at 1,200.
Blue was starting at 1,200.
The blue is different. Like the shaded blue is different, and it rarely shows up on the chart. There's only like 2 places in the US where it has a blue vignette, and the requirements for the blue vignette are different than the 700 and the 1,200. So we'll touch on that, but not very important to know that, versus this is very important. This purple vignette, the magenta, is going to be everywhere.
Okay.
So this is what we want to know. This is covering a lot of airspace. And it's easy to see right here, but a lot of the times it's covering, again, you have to zoom out and see the big picture. It's covering usually a larger airspace and like a rectangle that is covering the inside of these, like filling in the inside of these airspaces.
So can you go over that again? The
Yes.
inside is the 700
Mhm.
VAGL.
Yes,
And the outside is 1,200.
that's where Echo starts. Yeah. So Echo airspace starts inside of this vignette. Echo would start at 700 AGL. Outside, Echo starts at 1,200 feet AGL. So there's going to be other airspaces surrounding that you would be able to figure out from the surface to whatever it is. But we'll get into that. It gets just no inside 700, outside 1,200. And then we have this dashed magenta line. This is called a surface echo. So if this vignette shaded part starts at 700 and starts at 1,200, but if there is airspace that is in this dashed magenta line, that's surface echo. So it's exactly what it means. Echo airspace would start at ground level at the surface. Okay? I'll keep giving examples that complicate it a little bit more and hopefully clarify how we keep going, but that's the basis of what we need to know about echo for now. Okay, last one, class golf airspace. What's special about class golf airspace? Uncontrolled, right? All other airspace, including echo, even though you don't need two-way radio communications in echo, that is still controlled airspace. Class golf is the only airspace that is not controlled. Uncontrolled airspace. That's what I just said. From the surface to overlying airspace. So wherever other airspace doesn't start at the surface, it will be golf at the surface. Okay, so we'll go back for a second. In this, inside this circle, at the surface is echo, right? Because this is surface echo. But right outside this circle, but inside the magenta, what is at the surface? What airspace? Golf, right? So this is a very confusing example of this, but inside this surface echo is the airspace at the surface. But right outside that circle, but still inside this vignette, so like right here, right here, right here, on the lake right here, all this is golf at the surface up until what? When does echo start right here? 700, right? Then out here, what's at the surface? Golf. To what altitude? 1,200. Is this sort of making sense? Okay? So if there's no airspace showing you what that there's something else at the surface, it's going to be golf. Like you have nothing over here showing you there's a delta that starts at the surface, there's not a surface echo. So at the surface is going to be golf, and then depending on if it's inside or outside a vignette like this, it will tell you if echo starts at 700, like inside here, or if echo starts at 1,200. I'm seeing a lot of blank stare. We're gonna keep going, but I'll come back to this many, many times, but I want to clarify in that picture, since we're talking about golf, what it means from the surface to overlying airspace. So surface golf, and then the overlying airspace would be echo, where echo starts at 700. So that means golf goes from the surface to what altitude? If we're inside the vignette and echo starts at 700, so 699, right? So when we say echo starts at 700, that means at 700 AGL, you are in echo airspace. So golf only goes from the surface to 699, right? We already talked about no entry requirements for class golf because it is uncontrolled. They don't care what you're doing out there. And minimums, oh shoot, day or night above 10,000 MSL, 5 statute miles of visibility, and 111. This is similar to what we just wrote for Echo above 10,000, right? Same thing. 5111. 1 statute mile visibility horizontal from the cloud. 1 statute mile from the cloud. Okay. While we're here talking about the minimums, I'm going to show you the triangle that I remembered.
Was it a little different below?
That was
About
1,000 above, 1,000 below, and 1 statute mile horizontal. It's the same as Echo above 10,000.
below 10,000. So.
Oh, none.
Oh.
Okay, weather minimums. Okay, if you're a visual person, this is how I remembered it. This is a Quizlet, but not the way that looks. Can I just look at it without going to the? Let's see.
You right click it. You right click it, click open, it should be tab.
Thank you. Okay. Draw this triangle right now to help you. Or look it up and draw it on your own. But this is how I remembered all of the different weather minimums. Some people aren't visual learners. I'm visual, so I would literally either draw this out or I would visualize it in my head to remember what it was, but it covers everything. Echo and golf above 10,000 feet MSL is 5111. And then everything else is below 10,000 feet MSL. So you have the bottom of the triangle is for Bravo airspace, 3 statute miles, clear of clouds. And then you have golf at night, golf during the day, and then Charlie, Delta, Echo all the time. And then golf during the day below 1,200 feet AGL is 1 statute mile, clear of clouds. Yeah, so we know what the 152 means, we know what the 111 means, we can apply it to everything. And then clear down here means clear of clouds. Okay. I'll give you 30 more seconds, but if you don't have it down, you just saw me Google it, so Google it yourself. I've got a lot of heads going back and forth. And there are a bunch of other examples to look at. I feel like this is just the clearest one to have in your head. You're just gonna have to memorize it whatever way works best. Okay? I'm done with this now. Google it if you need to. There's a bunch of other examples here. That one. This one. It's all the same thing. Okay. All right, moving over. Golf. Okay, here's specifically, this should be, this is in the triangle, so just look at the triangle. Don't try to write all that down. Okay, special VFR. Special VFR is something that you can ask ATC for, and they can give you a special VFR clearance. So you would ask for this if you want to operate under VFR weather minimums, but you have the ability to stay clear of clouds. You have to request it from ATC, and you must remain clear of clouds. So if the weather outside is overcast, it's just a layer of clouds, there's no holes, they're not single clouds. This is something that you can't ask for because there's no way to remain clear of clouds. It's just a whole layer of clouds. But if you have something like broken layers of clouds that you are able to basically move between the clouds, then you can ask for special VFR from ATC. This is mostly going to happen if you're already in the air and say you go over to Compton and you're doing landings and then a cloud layer moves in over the airport, over Torrance, and it's now reporting under VFR minimums over Torrance and you're stuck at Compton. If you are able to remain clear of clouds, you can get in the air and request from Torrance Tower to get special VFR clearance back to the airport. But you have to be able to remain clear of clouds. And the flight visibility must be at least 1 statute mile, which is very, very low, so it shouldn't be hard to get 1 statute mile. But you can request special VFR to take off. The ground visibility must be at least 1 statute mile if you're going to request it for takeoff. Most people are using special VFR to get back to the airport because weather shifted. But it's pretty risky to make a decision to take off with special VFR because you're taking off already into minimums under VFR weather, and the chances of it only getting worse are pretty high. So I personally would not take off with special VFR, but it's an option. To perform special VFR at night, you cannot. You and the plane must be instrument rated and equipped. Since you are a private pilot student or a private pilot after, or an instrument student after you've gotten your private pilot, you cannot request special VFR at night. You have to be instrument rated and the plane has to be instrument equipped. No one writing that down. Okay, speed limits. Okay, we will never have to worry about these in a sling. We can barely get over 100 most times. We're doing good if we can get like 105. So we need to know the aircraft speed limits for later when we get to the big boys. But speed limits below 10,000 MSL is 250 knots, indicated airspeed. That's what KIAS means. 250 knots, indicated airspeed. Below 2,500 AGL and within 4 nautical miles of a class Delta or Charlie, you have to be 200 knots indicated airspeed. So basically, if you're in range of a Charlie or a Delta within 4 nautical miles and below 2,500, they want you to slow down. They want you to be at 200 knots indicated airspeed. Below a Class Bravo or through Class Bravo VFR corridor, you also have to be at 200 knots indicated airspeed. So they have this little picture. This is just like the hole I showed you that goes through the Bravo that we can fly through with LAX special flight rules for the coastal route or any of those. We'll go over those. But if you're flying in the middle of the Class Bravo through the corridor, you have to be at 200 knots indicated airspeed. If you're flying underneath any of the Bravo shelves, you have to be 200 knots indicated airspeed. And if you're flying anywhere in any airspace under 10,000 MSL, you have to be at 250 knots or below. That's your speed limit. Okay. Alright, we're gonna get into special use airspace. There's a whole bunch of these. So we'll have to keep running kind of fast through these, but special use airspace is obviously what it says. Airspace in which special or certain activities must be confined and there are limitations on aircraft operations in special use airspace. So they have a list here of all the special use, but I'm gonna get into a slide about every single one of these, so it's not really necessary to write this down right now. We're just gonna keep going. Prohibited areas. Who can tell me about prohibited areas? Anyone? What does it sound like? Yeah?
Can't go there.
Exactly. It's prohibited, right? What we need to understand about special use airspace is there is one airspace in which we cannot go under any circumstances unless there's an emergency. The emergency is always the caveat, but we are not allowed in prohibited areas. That is the only special use airspace where we are definitively not allowed to fly into, okay? We'll get into they will show a picture after this, but aircraft is prohibited in this area. Pretty clear on that. It's for security reasons and national welfare and blah blah blah, but areas like where the White House is, the National Mall in Washington, D.C., Camp David, things like that, under no circumstances are you ever allowed to fly through or will you be cleared to fly through prohibited areas. I would even try to find somewhere else if you're having an emergency very close to a prohibited area, but in an emergency, you are technically allowed to fly into it if you have to land there, but you're probably never going to be anywhere near a prohibited area anytime soon. But biggest thing on the chart, there's going to be charted with a P followed by number, so P-40-20- whatever it is. And do you have a picture? Good. It's gonna be like, it's not always gonna be a perfect circle like this, but whatever airspace it's covering, it's gonna be a solid blue line with like teeth inside of it. Does that make sense? And it will say prohibited and it will say P- some number. This number is so you are able to look at what the prohibited area is for. Does anyone know where we would look for this information on special use airspace? Does anyone actually have, you probably should, do you have real sectional charts, paper sectional charts? No? Okay. Unfortunately, you might need to get them because we're gonna do navlogs later. And in order to do a paper navlog, here's my thing. You have to have something like this, a plotter, and you have to put this on paper, on an actual map, and then twist it around to get your course information. So I think it's week 6 or 7 that we're gonna do paper navlogs and get into navlogs, but you're gonna need a plotter like this, and you're gonna need an actual sectional chart. So lucky for you, I have a sectional. This is what it looks like. For anyone that doesn't know, huge map, right? Inside the sectional, on the opening, there's a bunch of information about each of these airspaces depicted on here. So you would go to where is it? For each facility, like on here, we're gonna get into MOAs, but it has the name, it will have the prohibited area, and you're able to look at, okay, for example, this P-49, and then get information about that special use airspace. You already know from what we just talked about, prohibited, we're not allowed to fly in there anyway, so there's not a lot of information to give you other than what the airspace is called. But for other special use airspaces, this is where we find information on when it is hot and cold, meaning when you are allowed to fly through that airspace and when you need permission to fly through. So hot and cold meaning on or off, right? The airspace is on, you are not allowed to fly through it, or off, cold, you are allowed to fly through it. There's also a legend on the back of the actual chart, so it can be helpful to carry it around also in the plane if your avionics fail, but you're probably gonna need to get this or share it with someone that you sit next to and go in on one, because you'll need it to actually do the paper nav logs. You can't measure the true course in ForeFlight. ForeFlight will give you the magnetic course, which is already corrected, but if you're doing a paper nav log, you need the actual plotter on paper and measuring between them for the true course. We'll get back to that, but let's everyone go into ForeFlight on their iPads. And go to your VFR map. That looks like this. Alright, and everyone move down the coast to this area. I don't know any prohibiteds that are near us, but this right here, we're gonna get into on the next slide. But on ForeFlight, if there's a special use airspace, you can click on the special use airspace on ForeFlight. If you click on that area that has special use airspace, it will pop up like a sidebar on here that shows you airspace in that area. So for example, if you go down the coast and you click on this R2503 Bravo and Charlie, it's right under John Wayne, right before San Diego. If you click on it, it will say R/2503 Alpha under the tab that it pulled up, and you can click details, and it will give you all the details about activation hours and flight restrictions and altitude restrictions. Okay. So that's the easy way to get information about special use airspace, but the actual chart has it all written down on the chart as well. We'll get back to this. You can play around on looking at different things, but what we just looked at is a restricted area with the R. So restricted areas are where operations are hazardous to us who are not participating aircraft. It's not wholly prohibited. That's what we need to understand. Prohibited airspace is the only airspace that we definitively cannot fly into. Everything else is up in the air of what times it's active, what altitudes it covers, who we're talking to get permission. Okay, so restricted areas obviously subject to restrictions. So they're charted with an R, like you can see if you're looking on ForeFlight, and R followed by a number. So information can be found, like I just showed you, on the inside flap of the VFR sectional. And then, like I said, you can just click on that airspace around it. It will come up with a little sidebar. And then you can click under airspace, choose which one you're trying to look at, and you can find details about that. So you can see for, which one? For restricted area 2503 Charlie, the upper limit is 27,000 and the lower limit is 15,000. So we don't even have to worry about this airspace because the lower limit is 15,000 MSL. But then it gives us information about activated by NOTAM. If it has hours, it will tell us what those hours are that's activated, things like that. So, can you fly into a restricted area?
Yes.
Yes, but you need to do your research before. A lot of the times, if you are on, do we know what flight following is yet? Some of us. Flight following is what you get from ATC, and then that transfers you over to SoCal approach and departure. When you're flying on cross countries, flight following is a VFR term for basically following a flight plan with a controlling agency like SoCal that's kind of watching you across or on your cross country, and they'll give you traffic information and kind of pass you off to each controller as you move across the country. And on flight following, because you're with a controlling agency, if you are flying down the coast towards this restricted area right before San Diego, you can ask controllers on flight following whether the restricted area is hot or cold. A lot of times they'll let you know hot or cold, meaning hot, you cannot fly through it, it's active, cold, meaning you can fly through it, it's not active, right? But this is information you should be looking at before you fly anywhere near a restricted or special use airspace, okay? They look like this. Restricted with a number, Bravo and Charlie, same thing, a line with the little teeth inside of it. Warning areas, similar to restricted. The government does not have sole jurisdiction over the airspace because a lot of these warning areas, you'll see them on the coast. And since we're in California, there's a lot of warning areas around us, around the coast. They extend 3 nautical miles outward from the coast. It's basically warning you that you could be getting into international airspace because if you go so far out on the coast, you're no longer, the jurisdiction of the US government doesn't control you out in the ocean anymore. So if you're way far out in the ocean in a warning area, they also have a lot of military activity going around there. So it's warning you for if you're not participating, which you're not, a potential danger. So mostly over the water, we can see they have it's gonna be a W for warning area. Yeah, it looks like this. We have them all around us outside on the coast. Looks like a big area like this. Warning with a W and a number. And then it also has a little box about information on when it's active and not active. And again, we are not prohibited from flying through these areas, but it's letting us know that there's activity there that we should be wary of. Okay, then we have MOAs, military operation areas. Also, same thing, these are going to be areas of like high military training traffic areas. A lot of IFR traffic. They want to separate IFR traffic from these military activities. So it's used to separate them. Clearance is not needed under VFR like we talked about. You are allowed to fly through them, but you have to like exercise extreme caution. I would avoid them personally. They have a bunch of training going on in there. They could be flying fast jets, they could be shooting whatever into the air. They keep like radar coverage on these areas, so the military will know if you enter these areas where they're operating, and they'll probably stop whatever training they're doing as you fly through it. But again, you're allowed to fly through it if you feel the need, but it's not smart. And again, you can find additional information inside the sectional. They look like this. Yes.
Nobody's ever hot or cold.
No, they're not hot or cold like restricted areas. Yeah. It's areas where it's just known to be military training areas every day. So you expect the military trainees going on, and they also always have a name. So like this is Bristol, MOA, Turtle, MOA. These areas, it's gonna be magenta with the little teeth marks inside. And again, this covers a huge area. So if say you were flying over this lake down here, you could fly following the lake that cuts into the MOA, and you don't have to speak to anyone, but you need to be looking outside and situationally aware of traffic in the area if you're going to cross through it. Cause who knows what they're training in here. You could be putting yourself in danger of whatever they're doing if they're not able to stop fast enough when you enter the airspace. But they're gonna be watching you, so they'll probably be watching you outside of the area and they'll stop whatever they're doing if you enter. Alert areas, same things. These are all kind of the same idea of alert areas are going to be concentrated flight training, not necessarily military flight training, but technically our practice area is an alert area. It's not charted like that on a sectional, but it should be charted on a sectional for an alert area because there's so much concentrated flight training in the area, a high volume of traffic in the area that you just need to be alerted is a busy airspace, right? So it's gonna be alert area, it's gonna have an A dash a number. It's just telling you be cautious in this area if you're gonna fly through it because there's a lot of traffic and activity, aerial activity. Okay, again, we can fly through it, you don't need to talk to anyone, you just have to be cautious. Military training routes. They're used by the military to basically keep a distance for tactical flying from other people. They're established below 10,000 feet MSL and they can't go above 250 knots. But there they are. So they're separated by VFR and IFR training routes. They're gonna have VR, IR training routes on it. And it's gonna have either a 4-digit number behind it or a 3-digit number behind it. And this is based off the altitude that it's gonna be at. So if it's, let me double check myself before I say. Okay, if there's 4 digits, then the route that they're flying on is going to be at 1,500 feet AGL and below. And if the number is 3 digits, it's going to be above 1,500. So 3. Above 1,500. And then if it has 4 numbers, it's below. Same number, I'm not gonna write it again with the pen, but below 1,500 AGL. And then it's separated by VFR traffic versus IFR traffic. So these are routes that the military is training on. They're flying these exact lines, practicing tactical flying on these lines, and they will, based on the numbers, either be above 1,500 feet AGL flying along this line, or they will be below 1,500 AGL flying along this line based on the 4 digits or 3 digits. Okay. They're basically alerting you that they're flying low and fast. So if you're crossing these areas, you have to be vigilant and cautious because they're flying very fast at 250 knots and they're flying very low if they're below 1,500 feet AGL. But it's based on the numbers, okay? I don't know why they don't have that in the slides, but we got that. 4 numbers below 1,500, 3 numbers above 1,500, and then it says VR for VFR, IR for IF.
What is the actual one?
It's just a number assigned. It's only based on the digits, so you know at what altitude they're flying through. Basically flying through this route, but the numbers have nothing to do with us. That's just an assigned number. Say again?
Like an identifier.
Yeah. It's just identifying what route they're on. It doesn't tell us anything about what they're doing. Yeah. Keep going. There's so much, I know, we gotta get through more. What time is it? 10:35. TFRs, this is what we looked at earlier on the sectional. This is those red circles. So TFRs are gonna be in our NOTAMs, right? Our notice to airmen that are issued. Temporary flight restriction for that area. So they're gonna give us information on the location, we can see it on the sectional. They're gonna give us an effective time period and the area defined and what altitudes flight is restricted at. So I talked a little bit about this before, but a lot of the times in the LA area, they have VIP TFRs, meaning they're protecting public figures that are flying in and out of the area, so they restrict the airspace that other people are allowed to fly in. They also can put TFRs up over an area for disaster relief, or they put it over for the Super Bowl. They have TFRs for the Dodger games over Dodger Stadium. They have TFRs over Disneyland, which you saw on the map. And there's supposed to be temporary flight restrictions that have an effective time period that they're active. But the Disney one is an oddity of they just keep it up there at it's an indefinite TFR. It's not supposed to be indefinite, but they keep extending it and they don't want anyone flying over Disney. So that's one of the ones that's a temporary flight restriction, but it's there all the time. Yes.
Does Disney have to like, if they have to?
I believe so. I believe they have to request it every time, but we can look at what details they give us about it. But like we saw on the map earlier, it's gonna be this red circle that's kind of shaded in a little bit. And then when you click on it, it's gonna give you information on TFR, what day. It's for a baseball game. The Phillies game begins at this time Zulu, and the TFR is effective on this date from this time to this time, from the surface to 3,000 feet AGL. And then it tells you it will be live in 8 hours. So Disney one. Oh. Disney one effective immediately until further notice. So that's been there for years. From the surface to 3,000 AGL, valid until further notice. This is going to be forever, apparently, but that means from the surface to 3,000 AGL, you cannot fly through this airspace. It's restricted airspace. You have to, 1, go around it, or 2, you can request from a controlling agency like SoCal. You can request to fly through it. Some people have gotten, especially late at night, if they're flying back on a cross country, you can ask to be cleared down to like 2,500 and fly through it. And sometimes if they're feeling nice, they'll clear you, but without speaking to a controlling agency and getting clearance, you have to avoid this area. Same with these little circles, also TFRs. Usually they're bigger than this, but this says for security, effective until October 31st at 1859 Zulu, from the surface to 1,000 feet AGL, valid for 59 days. Means you cannot fly through this little area. This one also, I think there are a couple more. This one for security, this one for security. I believe these are, maybe these are people's houses. I have no idea what they're covering here, but let's see if they're, when the fires were happening, they had a huge TFR over the Pacific Palisades because they were doing fire operations and rescue, right? So they shut down that whole airspace to other traffic. And a lot of times our whole airport has been shut down for TFRs for like Trump and other people in the area. They put a big circle that basically covers our entire airport whenever he flies in or out. So be looking for those. Sometimes they shut down operations at the airport, which is unfortunate, but if there's a TFR in any of the area, especially over top our airport, if not in the practice area, that means we can't fly, right? We're restricted in that area. So yeah, TFRs are gonna be in our NOTAMs that we check before every flight. If there's TFRs in the area, they will be in the NOTAMs. And then you also check the sectional chart, right? Okay. Terminal radar service areas, TERSAs. TERSAs are when controlling agencies like for Palm Springs is the biggest example. Palm Springs is a Delta airspace that wants to be a Charlie airspace. They have so much traffic, including international traffic that goes to Palm Springs. And they want more control of the airspace. Here, I'll go back. They want more control of the airspace for all that traffic. So they came up with the terminal radar service area, which is basically just an extended service area outside of their initial airspace for the Delta, so that they can encourage people to communicate with tower as they're coming in. So this is not required that if you fly into a TERSA that you are required to talk to a controlling agency, but it's highly encouraged because that means there's so much traffic that they want additional radar services. So here's what it looks like on the chart. It's like a gray. Can you see that? It's the gray thick line. It's hard to see because this is Echo Vignette little thing right here. And then this gray line is the TERSA. So you can see that the Palm Spring Delta is tiny. It's this little circle right here. And because they want more control of this entire area instead of just this little circle, they created a TERSA. So if you fly into the TERSA, they are expecting and wanting you to contact whatever tower you're closest to and let them know what you're doing. Okay? Highly encouraged, but not required. It just allows more radar service for these controlling agencies to monitor what aircraft are in the area and coming into the airport. Because they want to separate the international IFR traffic from VFR traffic, and it's hard to accommodate that much aircraft and traffic in this tiny little area. If people waited till they got like right outside this Delta, they would have way too much to organize before getting to the runway. So they want to be able to organize you outside of this whole area to get into the airport. Make sense? I'm gonna keep going. Parachute jump operations. Oh, really easy. See the little parachute guy? That's a parachute jump operations. They are published in the chart supplement, formerly the AFD. We talked about this, it's the same thing. They are published. Sites that are frequently doing parachute jumps are published on the chart, so you can see, and it has a caution over here, intensive parachute activity, and it has what frequency you can get on to ask them if they're doing parachute jumps. Obviously, this is important because you don't want to be flying straight in the middle of a bunch of people parachuting out of a plane, right? Okay, I think we're gonna move on from that. All right, national security areas. This is rare to see on a chart, but obviously if you go to DC and other stuff like that, you'll see it. But this, what does this look like that we already talked about? Oh, yeah, the dash one. This isn't a special use, but this looks very similar to a surface echo. Do you remember from when we talked about echo, you could have a dashed magenta line, and that meant that the surface started at echo? We'll have to go back to this, but this is like thick dashed lines, and that means a national security area. This is one of those where they try to trick you in the check ride or the face check, and you've studied the surface echo, but you haven't really seen a national security area. So they ask you, what is this? And you say, oh, that's a surface echo, because it looks like it. It looks exactly like it, except the lines are just thicker. And then like, no, you're wrong. National security areas will have this little box. So make sure when you're looking at whatever airspace, follow this little line, this little arrow that they put on there, and read the box, because that'll tell you exactly what it is. National security area below, at or below 5,000 AGL. Okay? Read the box if it's there, look around. But yeah, they have dimensions. It's for increased security, safety of ground facilities. Pretty self-explanatory. Same here, it might not be a circle, it could be a square, but the really thick line, dash line, national security area, and then they will have a box for it every time that says national security, requested to avoid this area at this altitude. Okay? We gotta keep moving. Air defense identification zones. I have a picture, there we go. This is gonna be our borders, right? So if you fly all the way down to San Diego and you go to Brown, which is the airport right before you cross over into Mexico, they will have an air defense identification zone. It's this line with the little dots on the side of it. So aircraft entering US domestic airspace from points outside must identify themselves for entry or exit. I think this makes sense. It's a boundary between countries. Yeah, if you're gonna fly through it, you have to file with the appropriate facility at least 15 minutes before. You shouldn't be doing this, so don't worry about it. But it's this line down here that separates our border from Mexico and the US. Okay? And if you're gonna fly through it, it says you have to file with the appropriate aeronautical facility at least 15 minutes before you fly over it. Okay, then we have wilderness wildlife areas. This is important because you probably will get asked this on a face check, on a check ride, it might be on the written too. This box with these little dots inside, do we see that whole area? This whole area is a wilderness wildlife area. It is for national parks, recreational areas, seashores, national monuments. It is this blue line with little dots on the inside of it. And they don't even have it on here. We can fly through it, but does anyone know what altitude we need to stay above? Yes.
2,000.
Yes. Someone did their homework. Okay. Yeah. 2,000. It's not, you won't get in trouble. It's not a hard ceiling of you can't go below 2,000, but is requested and followed by everyone that flies, that it's common courtesy and they want you to stay above 2,000 feet AGL over these areas that are wilderness wildlife areas. Okay? 2,000 is the number over these areas. Okay, finally done with this. We're gonna keep, what time? We still have 30 minutes? Okay. We kind of have to move through a little bit of tomorrow to try to get ahead because we're one day behind, but I'm gonna move back to this. What is this? Right? Tiny wilderness area. And we have to stay how many feet above this area? 2,000, good. Whoa. Okay, Big Bear. If I'm inside Big Bear, I'm right here where my mouse is. I'll draw a dot. I'm right here. From the ground up, what is my airspace? Okay, I'm in golf at the ground to what? 699, right? Then at 700, what airspace starts? Echo. And echo goes to what? Not 1,200. Not 1,000. Okay, here's where we're confused. So, oh, my dot moved. Okay, so the 700 AGL and the 1,200 AGL are our starting points for echo. That's not our ceiling that it goes to. So we use that to determine if we're inside or outside where echo starts. But if there's no overlying airspace, which we'll have to zoom out to see if there's overlying, maybe if there was a Bravo shelf over this or a Delta over here, but we don't see any overlying airspace, right? It's just this. So it would keep being echo all the way until when? 18,000, right? Because that's when what airspace starts? Alpha, right? So this is what we have to remember when we're talking about from the ground all the way to space. Because technically, after you go to alpha, to what is the ceiling of alpha? 60,000? What's above alpha? Space, but it also goes back to echo, right? Echo to the moon. It goes all the way, it's technically space, we're not flying up there ourselves, but it's going back to echo because echo's filling in all that airspace around what's been given to us, right? So if we go, what's a better one? Okay. Here's probably not the hardest, but this is like a normal question that we're gonna get. I am here on this little 5,000 little peak right here. If I'm right here at the surface, what airspace am I in? Delta, right? Because I'm inside this dashed line. Good. Because we saw we're inside the vignette, but we're inside the delta. More importantly, is going to be our surface. Then delta until what altitude? 5,400. And what airspace are we in? I'll zoom out so you can verify. No, echo's right. We don't go back to golf. Golf is just going to be that surface golf that we start at. Anything above that we're filling in is going to be echo. Echo is E for everywhere. Echo is everywhere outside of our initial. So if we start surface to 5,400, then from 5,400 up to 18,000, we are echo. And then above that, we're in alpha until 60,000, and then above that we're back to echo into space, okay?
What's the circle outside of the cluster?
Oh, okay. This is a compass rose, like you can see the 330, this is 060, 090. This is a compass rose used for VORs. If you know what VORs are. You don't have to know that yet. It stands for very high frequency omnidirectional range, but that's really the name is not important. VORs are ground-based navigation systems that instrument, you'll use it a little bit in private. When you get to towards the end of private, you'll do a little bit of instrument flying, but you use it, it basically sends out, it looks like a little white cone, a ground-based navigation system, and it sends out radials in all directions, which is why the compass rose is here. So it's sending out a signal or a radial in each of these directions. So if you tune the VOR to the frequency for the ground-based system, you can follow basically a line that takes you like a highway. It takes you, once you follow, like if I'm doing radial 150, I can tune that in and then follow it directly on this line to the VOR or to the air, or whatever you're doing. It's a navigation system for VOR, ground-based. But that's what the compass rose outside of it. You'll see it over Seal Beach, because that's our closest VOR, and you'll see it over LAX. That's another closest VOR facility. But this is for the VOR instrument navigation system that they're using to fly through the air. Because if you don't have visual references, this is something you put in and you basically fly like a needle, like you're following a course to get where you're going. Makes sense? You technically, they'll ask you like, what does VOR stand for, blah, 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 but it's a ground-based navigation, yeah, used to fly courses, and it sends out radials so that we can fly, what is it? so that we can fly to or away from the VOR without having visual references. Okay. Before we get into tomorrow, because tomorrow's gonna be, I think, sectional, well. Yeah, tomorrow we're getting into the chart supplement. I'll get into this a little bit. So I've talked about the chart supplement before. In for flight, where do we find information about the airport? There's a couple different places, so we have to go over all of those. The AFD under each individual airport, if you go to the airport tab, under the airport, you can go to info. And then under chart supplement, it will say AFD and it will pull up the specific page for the airport that you're looking at. But the chart supplement started as a real book, a paperback book, just like everything else here. So the chart supplement is a full book based on the region of the US. So our chart supplement is under the Southwest Chart Supplement, a book that has airport information for California, Nevada, Utah, etc., right? So, does anyone know where we can find the actual full chart supplement book in ForeFlight? Okay, no, pull out your iPads. We're gonna download it right now on your iPad. You're gonna go to under Sling Pilot Academy Docs, there's FAA. Go to the FAA tab. Then under. Oh, okay. There's one under FAA that says chart supplement AFD in parentheses. Click on that. Then it's gonna give you all of the US regions. So go to Southwest. Does everyone see Southwest under chart supplement? Click on that. Download it to your ForeFlight if it's not already downloaded. And then if you want to add it, does everyone know how to add it to a folder? Are people making folders for like private and instrument and all that? Go ahead and add that to your private folder so you can get back to it easily. There's like a little plus folder binder. I guess they call it binders on here. There's like a little plus at the top right corner with a folder on it, and you can add a binder. So for the chart supplement, we looked at it before. For airport information, it has a lot of information and a lot of it is confusing and it gives way too much. But the first, what page is this? The first page 14. Bookmark page 14. The beginning of this chart supplement is going to have the legend that tells you exactly what each line of the chart supplement or the AFD reads, okay? If you look on page 14, there's a sample that literally has a number for every single line of the chart supplement. So if there's anything that you don't know what that means, go to the legend, look at the sample, figure out what line you need to read, and then go to the next page, or the page after that. And it will explain exactly what they're telling you in the chart supplement. Does everyone see that? No?
I'm down.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
downloading.
Okay. Actually, I don't know if it'll, but it will say that. You'll get that eventually. What else does it want to know? Okay, important to know, the actual chart supplement book with all the airport information is published every 56 days. People see that right here? Every 56 days. That's important to know. You might be asked that. And we already know that the chart supplement has all this information: airport hours, types of fuel, runway data, lighting codes, etc., etc. Like you can even see on here, it has an example of land and hold short operations, and it gives available runway landing distances. Like we talked about with land and hold short operations, it tells you how much landing distance you have before you have to hold short. Also, the AFD itself updated 56 days. So the chart supplement is the whole book of all the airports for the region, and they changed the name for each page for the airport to AFD. Okay? We're talking about the same thing. When I say chart supplement, I mean the chart supplement for the airport. It's the airport facility directory. Okay. We already talked about NOTAMs. This is back. So back when they did this in November of 23, they changed NOTAMs to mean notice to air missions because they wanted to take out men. And then I think in the beginning of this year, they changed it back. So NOTAMs is back to notice to airmen. And yeah, we were talking about they're normally temporary. There's a wide range of reasons. We are probably looking at them for taxiway and runway closures and operative lighting systems. We're not looking at changed approach minimums. That's going to be instrument flying, but you check NOTAMs before every flight. That's also going to be where you find TFR information if there's something in the area. And we already talked about land and hold. Okay, this is the whole day 2. So we actually got through day 1 and day 2 today. Land and whole shore operations, we already talked about. Can you accept a land and whole shore operation clearance? No. What's also important to realize that I just remembered from our last meeting, the instructor meeting that we had, is they've actually changed sling to nobody flying a sling can accept a land and hold shore operation. So this will follow you through your entire training here. They just don't want anyone in the way of landing traffic on intersecting runways. So the rule by the FAA is a student pilot cannot accept land and hold shore operations, but a sling rule is that no one flying slings can accept land and whole shore operations. So good to realize that, even though right now it doesn't matter, you can't do it anyway. And here's something interesting that someone brought up outside of class that I feel like we need to address. So let's say you are not in a sling in this instance and you have your private pilot's license and they ask you, can you accept a land and whole shore operation? Can you accept the lasso clearance? And you accept the lasso clearance. And then you come in on final and you're like, I actually don't want to do it anymore. Can you decline after you've already accepted? This is where it gets tricky. The regulation says no, you cannot decline after you've already accepted, but people get mixed up because you can't decline the clearance and basically go back on the clearance that you've already accepted, doesn't mean you have to land under any circumstance. Can you still go around and have a rejected landing? Yes. Under every circumstance in landing, you can always go around. That does not change because you've accepted a lasso clearance. You can always go around. And people get this mixed up, yes.
Go around. Define it. Second time they ask.
Yes, they'll probably have to reissue a clearance or they will reissue a new clearance. Once you've gone around and you come back to land again, they'll have to reissue a clearance and you can deny at that point if you don't want to do it. If you are coming into land and is unsafe or unstable, you always have the option to go around. I've heard people say that you have to land no matter what. That's just not the case. You do not have to land the plane if it's unsafe, even if you've accepted the lasso. They actually have a lasso rejected landing. The FAA published this procedure for rejected landings. Again, what are you gonna do? Never accept this anyway. If ATC comes on the radio and asks you to accept a land and hold short clearance, what are you saying? Unable, student pilot, or the other way. You say you're unable. But they published this whole thing because if a rejected landing becomes necessary after accepting the clearance, you should just remain a safe separation from other aircrafts or vehicles and notify the controller. That does not mean that you have to land just because literally anything can happen on the runway. If for some reason you cannot land safely, you do not have to land. And then this is just saying that some chart supplements will have specific instructions on headings to follow if you have a rejected landing after being given a clearance, and some of them will have published rejected landing procedures that you need to follow. Otherwise, if there aren't published You will just go around like normal, tell them as soon as you can, that you're going around, and they will probably give you directions, to follow to get out of the way. But the problem with land hold short operations is you will have time to go around if you need to. They're not sequencing planes, landing on intersecting runways to land at the same time and stop in front of each other. You should be sequenced to land and stop, and then a plane will land in front of you or across from you. So if you decide to go around, that doesn't mean you're gonna be directly colliding with the plane that has been cleared to land. They will figure it out. Your safety getting on the ground is more important, and they have a whole section saying it's okay to reject the landing, okay? So always, 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 always go around if it is not safe to land, or you'll go over this a million times with your instructor, but a go around is better than a botched landing, right? Go around every time instead of botching whatever landing you were gonna do. Okay. I think we literally covered all. Yeah, how is a whole day gonna be just these 5 slides? I don't know. Tomorrow, we're gonna get into actual chart symbology. We're gonna go through the legend. The legend is there to help you, but you're gonna be expected to look outside of the legend, and just someone's gonna point to some figure on the sectional, and you're gonna have to tell them what it means. So we're gonna go through all that tomorrow, specifically. Hopefully airspace will have time Friday to review before the quiz again if we're confused, but we should be from this point on just going over all the sectional and just quizzing a bunch on the different airspaces. So that should be it for today.